Greetings and salutations, Ranting Engineer back at you. Even though I'm done the energy series, I've had some requests to do some further videos. This one comes basically from the Facebook pages of my friend Lee Cernak. There was a lot of discussion around Saudi Arabian oil and why is it still imported into Canada, and if there are some links to Liberals and Justin Trudeau. So I'm going to take most of this video to talk about the technical aspects of why Saudi Arabian oil is still being imported, how we could kind of stop that, and then towards the end, we'll get into some of the stuff about Justin. Now, keep in mind, I am not a fan of Justin. This is why I like the technical stuff, because I also don't like politics, as most people know. Anyways, that aside. So, there's basically two main reasons why Saudi Arabian oil is still being imported. Now, if you go back, you watch, I think it's episode 14, I did a video already on Canadian oil, ranting about why is Canadian oil considered dirty, and it's not dirty, it's considered heavy. Well, if you haven't had a chance, read or watch that one first, because it kind of gives you background of what I'm going to talk about here. So, we all know that Saudi Arabian oil is not imported on the western side of Canada, okay? When you look at the east side, and I'll stay away from Ontario, I'll talk about a little bit about Ontario, but mostly we want to talk about Quebec and eastern side of Canada. So right now there's basically only 4 refineries east of Ontario. So because they shut down the Shell refinery in Montreal. I was actually there when they were decommissioning it for a different project. So Petro-Canada turned into Suncor. So there's the Suncor refinery in Montreal. There is the Valero refinery in Quebec City. There's Irving Oil over in New Brunswick, and there's the Come By Chance refinery up in on the Rock, Newfoundland. I can't remember the company that owns it anymore. Come By Chance. I'll just call it Come By Chance for now. So, Come By Chance refinery actually refines Hibernian oil. It's brought in by tanker. They're talking about putting a coker in there just to handle some of the stuff that's going on. But literally, it's basically Canadian oil right now. I know there were some upgrade projects that you were trying to do there, but on the most part, it's Canadian oil. As far as I know, Suncor is trying to put in a coker in the Montreal facility. I actually think my company was bidding on that work. I didn't have direct input into that stuff. But anyways, I do know they have a refinery out there. As you know, it's not set up for Canadian oils right now. However, from my understanding is they are not using Saudi oil in that refinery. Surprisingly, it's going to be Canadian and it's going to be American oils. You'd be surprised how much American oil is actually imported into Ontario and Montreal, as far as I know. The reason I say that is they reversed a line called Line 9, Enbridge Line 9, and that flipped oil to be able to bring oil up into that area out of the States. So, I'm going to say Suncor, being Petro-Canada, if the coker went in, it can take the heavier oils from Western Canada. And that's some of the technical limitations on these refineries. Last up is Irving Oil, which is out on the coast. Its basic problem is there is no connection to bring oil into it other than rail. So they've got to bring everything in by boat, everything in by ship. So the technical limitations on all those refineries is they can't run the heavy oils from Western Canada. They can run kind of the normal crudes out of Saskatchewan, some of the other stuff. So you can't send anything except synthetic crude oil or the conventional crudes over that direction to be refined. The other side of it is there's no infrastructure to support that other than rail. And we all know that rail has its limitations. Okay, there is, in fact, one of the rail accidents, derailments was actually the oil that was heading over to the Irving refinery. Now, as far as I know, and it's a bit dated, Mr. Irving, okay, so Irving Oil is actually a privately held company. It's all over the East Coast. As far as I know, they own some of the newspapers, and I believe one of their arms is actually involved in forestry products. So they're huge there, but it is a private family-held company. Now, Mr. Irving, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, went on record saying, yes, the TC pipeline, they liked it because they would prefer to actually produce Canadian oil, but they don't have a coker. So they can only take SCO. synthetic crude oil, which has been already through the upgrader, or some of the mediums that don't have the bottom end. And the reason is the bottom end is, I said in the previous video, is it's got stuff in it that can poison catalysts. It also makes a residue that is not great. We are looking into projects potentially, and I've mentioned this before, to take that bottom end and use it for things like carbon fiber potentially, or say for asphalt. So from a technical standpoint, the refineries can't run it right now. So we can't take the bulk of the Canadian Western heavy-ended oil and actually use it over there. Now, could we, if we actually upgrade the refineries? We could. However, we don't have the infrastructure to actually physically move the oil over there. And to take Western oils and ship them all the way around to the Irving facility doesn't make any sense. So from an economic standpoint, Irving Oil is importing Saudi oil because it's cheap. It's not only Saudi, it's also Algerian oil. Now, Valero in Montreal, or Valero in Quebec City, I actually don't know a lot about. Valero to me is an American company. It's out of, I think it's San Antonio, Texas. So they're set up there. The information I have on them is a couple years old, but as far as I know, they use a combination of American oil and Canadian oils, and they don't ship anything in. So all the oil that I'm aware of from Saudi and Algeria is going to Irving, okay? And they're doing it because of a technical limitation and economics. Okay, Saudi oil is cheap. Yeah, there's some problems with it because you got to ship it all the way overseas, so there's a safety thing. But if it's cheap and they can produce it to make a refined product and make money, they're going to definitely go after it. Okay, so that's why they're importing Saudi oil. Okay, they can rail some of the Canadian stuff out. The other side of it is, as I understand, is the line that was Energy East everybody talks about. Part of the deal was to run dilbit out there, not to be produced, simply to be shipped out. So for me, I'm like, okay, that's just another out for the dilbit. I personally would like to see Canada be self-sufficient, where we can actually ship around oil around Canada through pipelines, supplemented by rail, that all our refineries can run on Canadian oil. It just isn't there right now, okay? Running a pipeline across Ontario is a bit of a technical challenge. Can it be done? But there's a reason why Energy East, as far as I know, topped out at about $12 billion. It's grown across the prairies, not bad, but when you're going across Ontario, that's pretty interesting territory to put a pipeline. Okay, so when I look at Irving Oil, they're doing it because of technical limitations on the actual refinery. They're doing it for economic reasons. Mr. Irving said he would do the pipeline there, and they've killed Energy East. So that tells me I don't think Irving Oil is throwing money at Mr. JT. It doesn't add up. I'm not saying it isn't possible, but it doesn't make any sense. Private-owned company that has showed interest. Now, I'm just going by the word of what everything I've read and what I know about Mr. Irving Sr. Because remember, he's handed the reins, I think he's in his 70s, maybe 80s now, handed to his son. And they're keeping it close to the family. So they're going to do what's in their best interest for their, we'll call it their little empire, if you want. I was surprised actually to find out that Valero, and keep in mind this information is about 2.5 years old, wasn't importing Saudi oil. I thought it would be. But the fact it is a Texas-based company makes more sense that they're moving American oil up there to refine to sell into the Canadian market. And then Suncor is Suncor, former Petro-Canada. The fact that they want to put a coker in tells me they want to use Canadian crudes from a technical standpoint. So when I put all those pieces together, it's hard for me to find a connection that they would be linked to Justin Trudeau on that standpoint. Okay, I know his grandfather made his money in hydrocarbon. I personally hate his father. My dad would like to take that guy and shoot him in the head long before he died. But anyways, aside. So from my standpoint, I'm looking at it. I understand from a technical standpoint why they're bringing in Saudi oil. From a standpoint, as a process engineer, I'm going, it makes perfect sense. From an economic standpoint, it makes sense. The fact that they're in New Brunswick on the water, bring it in by ship, makes sense. Okay? So, again, I go back to the connection with just, if people have some understanding, and I'm not talking about far-flung conspiracy theories and stuff. But again, if you look at the technical roadmap and you lay the economic roadmap on it, I just don't see anybody throwing money at Justin. It doesn't make sense. Now, aside from that, I think there's some connection with SNC-Lavalin based on my previous bosses, some friends in the industry talking about how they work. And as far as I understand, SNC-Lavalin has a lot of stake in the Quebec Pension Fund. Again, I haven't dug into it. SNC-Lavalin, so I know, is one of our direct competitions in the engineering world. Not my favorite people, but I got friends that work there. So that's, from a technical and economic standpoint, why Saudi oil is being inputted into this country. There are solutions for it. I can look at Canada and see energy solutions. They're not easy. They will be expensive, but I think they should be done. What it boils down to is if you get, I'll back up a little bit. From what I understand with Energy East, reading into it, the Quebec government didn't shoot it down. That was an eye-opener when I was, because I always assumed that was connected. No. As far as I know, it was of the regional, like the mayors and stuff like that, said no. I didn't get far into it because they shelved it, and it's kind of like, ugh, okay. But if we could get everybody on board, and with the education understanding that pipelines are very safe, okay, two things should be done. We should connect this country completely with hydrocarbon on a technical level that could be refined anywhere. That probably means some upgrades to some facilities. The other thing is if you remember not that long ago, when they had the problems with the rails, a lot of places in Quebec dried up from propane. So propane moved by rail car. Well, why wouldn't we string some pipelines to be able to move and transmit propane to local regional centers that could be moved around? Okay, something to think about. So again, we have a disconnect between West and East from an economic and a more technical standpoint. Back to my original points. When I look at it, I understand why Saudi oil is being brought in. I don't understand why people in general can't get their shit together. I hate politicians, I hate mayors, I hate all this stuff that do it for the wrong reason. All right? Whether they're backed by somebody saying no, they don't have the right information, they're throwing... In general, we could make Canada self-sufficient from an energy standpoint, water standpoint, but it's not being done. All right, have yourself a good night. Cheers.